Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the second show today. And this is difficult questions. Difficult questions about the faith of Islam, about how we practice Islam, how indeed our children relate to Islam, and how they have conversations with people who are not Muslim, or in the office, or in the college, or the university, and so on and so forth. And indeed, how do we relate Islam in the ordinary sense to ordinary individuals living life out there in the secular democracies that most of us live in? Jamshed lives in a secular democracy, a Welsh one. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yes, absolutely. And we've got Mohammad, Thompson and Firdaus. I keep wanting to call him Firdaus Wong, but Firdaus Wong is in Malaysia, and these guys are both in Auckland. Assalamu alaikum, Firdaus and Mohammad Thompson.
Alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh.
How are you guys today?
Alhamdulillah, bright and early.
Good?
Very early.
And yes, and Wasim Kempson is living in another secular democracy in London, one of the biggest cities in Europe. Assalamu alaikum.
My home, alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, but inside the bounds of my home, it's not secular and it's not a democracy.
It's
inside
not
my
a
house.
secular.
Inside my
Wow.
house. Yeah. I have
Now
authority in my house.
Yeah, be careful, brother. They're going to pick you up for that.
We have shura. We have shura in the room.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
You have sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why, why your name tag.
I was going to say, for
by the
for
way.
those of us who don't understand Arabic, what is a shura?
Shura is that we consult in the house. We have like a time where we kind of like consult with one another, share each other's ideas, and then I say what goes.
Then you control the fort.
No, I'm just joking. We just take what's best.
Yeah. That's what you'd like to happen. You'd like that to be the case, but of course it isn't. Yeah.
It's an ideal.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, today the topic is a problem of evil. What does that mean? What does it mean? It's basically the issue that every human being lives in a reality, in a human reality. And we have evil, and we have good, and we have consequences to evil, and we have consequences to doing good actions as well. We have reward for doing good actions. We want to talk about the idea of evil. Somebody, or many people now these days, are questioning Muslims as to why evil is allowed. Why should it be allowed? And indeed, if the creator of the universe did all of this and created everything, why does he allow evil? He can allow good, but he can't allow evil. That's not allowed. Well, let's discuss this. We're gonna pick up with our Welsh philosophical expert deep in to the valleys of the Welsh territory there, Jamshed. Oh, we got even a second name, Javed.
Yeah. I've upgraded since last time. I was actually going to say, I don't know where the Welsh philosophical expert is, but I will carry the mantle on behalf of the Welsh people because I think I'm the only Welsh person here. Jazakallah khairan. Bismillah. It depends really how far do we want to go with this, because there's so many different ways to tackle this. So the way I prefer to deal with this issue is go logically, step by step, in terms of one thing, necessarily leads to another or knocks one domino down. Now, the problem of evil often comes up as an argument to negate the existence of God altogether. So the argument in its briefest form is that, if God is all good, all knowing, all powerful, but evil exists, then, God is unable to prevent it, and therefore God can't be God, or some kind of a weird absurdity of this. And people often use issues of trauma in their lives. Something happened to me, something happened to my dog, something happened to someone down the street, whatever have you. And because that thing happened, therefore there is no God. They make the leap from this one personal or this one limited thing happening to all of a sudden denying the creator altogether. So the very first thing to tackle is the problem of evil. The fact that evil exists, first and foremost, can and does in no way change whether or not a creator exists. And the problem with this thinking is that people assume that if a creator exists, then he must be, or it must be, in a very particular way. And if it doesn't conform to that particular way that I've preconceived in my mind, or maybe some other ideologies have told me about, then by definition, the creator doesn't exist at all. A more accurate statement would be, or should be, no, the creator doesn't exist in the way that you've conjured him in your mind, but that doesn't negate the necessity for a creator for our reality in the first place.
Okay,
that makes
great.
Sense. Yeah,
that makes sense. So okay.
So anyone using this basically can't use this argument to say that God doesn't exist, because the two just don't correlate. One cannot lead to the other conclusion.
Okay, so let's put it out to the audience and the panelists that in the absence of evil, would good exist? In the absence of evil, would good exist?
Excellent question.
So let's put that out to Sheikh Wasim, who's looking very comfortable and needs to look less comfortable in his Shura maintained household. Alhamdulillah. Go ahead.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam, rasulillah wa ba'd. There is a well-known Arabic saying, that is as a logical statement you find in English as well, that with opposites, when you're having opposites, that things become clear. When you see the reality of two opposites, those matters actually become clear. So it's very important for us to, at the same time, when we talk about and discuss that what is evil and wrong, that we must also understand that what is good. Because what will determine something evil and wrong is in face of something that is good. Like when we're studying topics in Islam like Tawheed. Yeah, at the same time, you'll study aspects of shirk, associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the opposite of Tawheed. So it's very important for us to have this approach when talking about evil or good and evil. Now, Jamshed started a good conversation that if you're talking to a particular type of person who is possibly in denial about the existence of a creator, then you can take this discussion that way with that particular individual. You also have discussions with people who are possibly agnostic, who don't necessarily, by its definition, doesn't necessarily follow religion, but believes in something possibly, or people of faith, whether they're Hindus, Buddhists, Jews, Christians, or Zoroastrians, or whatever they may be. I think from an Islamic point of view, then when we're talking about good and we're talking about evil, there's a lot of factors for us to discuss, a lot of material for us to kind of discuss, and to a lot of kind of foundations for us to set out so that the discussion can kind of build on. So we as Muslims, we have understandings as to what we define as good and things that or things that are defined as evil. And this is in line with something called the fitrah, which is the natural disposition of a human being. Are they able to, and this is an interesting discussion as well, is the human being able to determine that what is good and bad by their own intellect? Can they, without any introduction of revelation, for example, is a person able to determine what is good and bad? This is something maybe we can speak about. Or are we completely reliant on revelation? And if you're talking to a non-believer in the Creator, then that's a bit of an issue. But nonetheless, it's difficult for us to bring, not difficult, but the starting point will be different if you're talking to an atheist as to how do we determine that what is good and evil. Well, we don't, of course, at the beginning here, I'm not going to go through all of the answers and of these particular issues, but this is something for us to to think about through the next hour or so when we're discussing these issues, inshallah ta'ala. And I think it's important that the viewers, for them to have an open mind about these particular topics. And I think that when we put all these things together, our understanding of the human disposition, starting point, and in our understanding of good and bad, this goes a long way in understanding the beauty of Islam, in how it goes to protect the human being, religion, life, money, wealth, all of these things. Muhammad is the same thing. The Sharia, or the greater objectives of the law, the revelation that was given to us. All of these are interlinked. Yeah. And once we have a clear kind of understanding of all these things, then it becomes a very, very beneficial topic.
It's very, very interesting definition and discussion. So the next question, because what we're trying to do is get the essential foundation of the topic out there, so that people understand why we're having this conversation, isn't it, Jamshed?
It is.
And so the problem of evil, it involves understanding morality as well. Yeah. What is morality? Is there a collective objective morality? Meaning, can we all agree on what is right and what is wrong as human beings? And generally, if you were to take 100 human beings and you put them in a room and without any objective bias, you ask them, is this evil? Is this good? You would probably find that 99% of the time the answers would be the same, right? Okay? So in terms of what is evil, I think we can agree on what is evil. However, nowadays, maybe the lines are being blurred. If we went back 30 years ago, do you think that we could all agree on evil, guys? Let's hear from Auckland. Let's hear from Mohammad Thompson to start with.
Assalamualaikum.
Yeah, wa alaikum salam.
Well, I'm not sure about what 30 years ago, 50 years, 100 years ago. I think, like we talked about last week and many other weeks, that we're all born with this natural inclination for good, like the fitra, of what is right and what is wrong. So over the years, there might be some clouding or things like that of different aspects of that. But I think still, if you get back to the roots of it, I think we all understand what is good and bad. But then we just push the boundaries, I suppose. People try and get away with whatever they can get away with. If they can get away with things, they'll get away with it. Like if the repercussions or what they perceive as repercussions and for what their actions are is a bit weak, then they'll push the boundaries a bit more and a bit more. And I think that this is the case. So it just needs that, yes, the morality in society has got a bit looser. The equal opportunities, new whatever rules and things like that are being imposed throughout the world by governments and things like that. Allowing more people to have a bit more looser understanding and then pushing the boundaries. Allah knows best.
Okay. So, Mohammed, Firdaus, you want to say something?
Yes,
as well?
I was about to say something actually. I wanted to start with about how do you define good and evil? Yeah. Right. For example, death. Is death an evil thing, or is it a good thing, or is something that we actually expect that all of us have to go through at some point in our lifetime? So because when someone die, the families and their children's or the parents, they got upset about these things. It's a form of trial, isn't it? So is it good or bad? Is death an evil thing? Why does God doesn't stop death, for example? So that's how I wanted to start with that, right? And I think the point has always been about when you don't have the whole understand about faith, or from the Islamic perspective, you start to see this good and evil as something, contradicting each other. I sometimes see, in the sense that good and evil is something that Almighty God put us for us, and actually it work in some way that maybe someone else's the speakers can actually explain this better. Maybe Jamshed can explain this better about the objective evil, or is an objective good. And I think that's where we have to start. So what is good and what is evil? I'm just gonna put it out there for others to explain that. Yeah.
Okay. Have we lost Yusuf? Uh-oh. Yusuf?
He's talking away to himself.
Yeah, we could. What's going on?
You know why? Because
there we go.
I'm blocking my mic because there's noise behind me. You see, so because I'm trying to do. I'm at home, guys.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not at home. Home is Jannah for me. Jannah, inshallah, and all of us, inshallah. So,
inshallah.
Meaning, we talked about what is evil, and we're going to talk about objective realities of objective morality, shall I say. I guess, and also we're going to need to address the question, but already Wasim has mentioned, who defines good and evil?
Yep.
Who defines good and evil? Okay. What authority should we take good and evil from? Okay. So, just Jamshed, let's go back to you.
Okay,
and let's get some insight.
So, let me rewind a very little bit to an earlier question you asked, which was, can you experience good without evil? And Sheikh Wasim addressed this from the perspective of understanding what evil is and things like that. But I want to go one step just before this to just actually look at good and evil in and of themselves. If you have no evil, and Sheikh Wasim mentioned this, you know things by the opposites. How can you experience good? The very fact that you know something is good means that you have to also be able to recognize the opposite of it or the absence of it, which necessitates something called evil to exist. As in, this is the opposite of the situation we want to experience or we want to be in. So the two come hand in hand. To experience one, you have to also know its opposite. To experience heat, you also have to experience or be aware of what it's like to have the absence of heat, i.e., to be cold. So in that sense, to recognize good exists, you have to recognize that evil has to coexist with it. And furthermore, now let's go on to the I suppose the morality or the way that you look at evil. You see, when someone commits an action, when any being commits an action or something happens, that thing just happens. Okay, when an animal eats another animal, it's just living out its life. It's just doing things. Now, the perspective of was that a good thing or was that a bad thing? That's only internal within us. We're just applying a label to it according to how we feel about that. If a lion eats a gazelle, the lion's going to feel pretty good about it. The gazelle is going to feel pretty gutted about it. It's the exact same action, but depending on from which way you're looking at it, you're going to have completely different contrasting perspectives. Whereas in reality, without our subjectivity in the objective world, there's no good and evil happening here. This is just different people's perspectives of the same one thing happening. So for human beings then to recognize that there are things in the world that should be collectively called good or collectively called evil demonstrates or indicates rather that there is some standard that is external to ourselves, that there is a standard of good and a standard of evil that's not being generated from the individual, but is somehow shared by the collective majority, which then begs the question, going into what you're saying, what Sheikh Wasim was saying, that where is this standard coming from? How do you know, how can you say a particular action is good and evil? And you have to, ultimately, if you go down this road, you have to come to the recognition that there needs to be some kind of an objective standard that transcends human beings as a collective to be able to define certain things as good, certain things as evil. Now, you may disagree with that. So let's just say, for example, from the Islamic perspective, we would consider alcohol to be an evil thing, the mother of evils. But there are many, many people in the world that think, no, it's a good thing. they're still applying their own subjective perspective here because they have their own individual feelings towards it. That still doesn't negate the fact that to have the concept that there is an overriding concept of something is good, something is evil, that there needs to be an objective morality indicator that we take to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, with the rules set out for us according to the Sharia. I hope that answers that part of that question.
Okay, yeah, it's good. I think it's good, guys, so far. We, by the way, getting loads and loads of people commenting.
I can see comments this time now. This is good.
The absence of evil would make good meaningless. Okay, This is what we've been saying. We've got lots and lots of good and evil are socially constructed concepts. There we are. There's one that we can argue against. Good and evil are socially constructed concepts from Sabrina. Sabrina's saying that, in actual fact, she's saying that we make it up as we go along, and society is formed as a result of our social interaction together, and we create. So good is a moving bar, and evil is a moving bar. So,
or she might be saying, she might be saying we perceive it as we go along.
Yeah.
Because there's an important distinction here. Sorry, let me go on a very small philosophical tangent, right? Here's a popular question. If a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? What do you reckon? So I would say the answer is no. Because when the tree falls in the woods, all it's doing is producing shock waves, right? It patterns in the air, and it requires a person to receive those shock waves in their ear to translate that into what you would call a sound. If there's no one there doing that, there is no actual sound. Does that make sense? Yes. So you have to recognize that certain things only exist because we perceive them to exist.
Absolutely.
So there could be that as well. Like I said, it just, actions happen. A lion eats a gazelle. It's just happening. There's nothing there, objective label that says, oh, this is good or evil. It just comes down to what you're experiencing and how you process that.
Okay, that's great. That's a lovely, and people like your gazelle example, by the way. Lion eating the gazelle is a good example. This is a survival mechanism created by Allah, so it is necessary. From Salwa, from the USA. She likes that very much. I want to go to Wasim and ask him about the authority behind good and evil. I mean, do we definitely have to have an authority that governs absolutes in evil and good?
Well, with regards to authority, if it's simply down to individuals, and that will change over a period of time, then it's completely subjective, meaning that what person thinks is good and evil today, then tomorrow it can be changed. Now, from an Islamic point of view, and there's a very well-known book. It's in 2 volumes. It's called. It's written by Izz ibn Abdul Salam. And it talks about benefit and harm. It's one of the best books written on the topic of al-masalih wal-mafasid, of benefit and harm. And he says that when we're looking at good and evil, benefit and harm, there are certain things which are pure benefit. That the sound mind, the person who's in a pure natural disposition, where there is something which is 100% purely good. And then there are things which are purely evil, purely bad. An example of that, something that's purely good is worshipping Allah. Okay, that's pure good. There is no perspective that that's bad in any way. And something which is purely evil is, for example, shirk. Okay, this is on a worship level. Let's say, for example, murder. This is purely evil. Taking the life of another person unjustifiably, okay? And from the beginning of time, when Qabil and Habil, they were there, he killed his brother, okay, from the first people that existed on earth. And immediately, and Allah tells us, فَأَصْبَحَ مِنَ النَّادِمِينَ, that he became from those who were regretful over that what he did. So there are certain things which were purely good, and then there are things which are purely evil. And this should be, if you like, universal. Universal. Everybody should know that, and you don't need revelation for you to be told that. It's innate for you to recognize that. Then there are things which are, like, can be determined depending on your perspective. So the example that Jamshed he gave, the example of the lion. From the lion's perspective, it's good. From the gazelle's position, it's bad. However, if we're told that for lions to exist, because everybody likes lions, you know, it's the king of the jungle, they have to eat the gazelles to survive, to be there in the jungle. The person will say, well, I don't like it, but I understand that's the way it has to be. Okay? So there are certain things which, if you're told, it might not, you know, your initial kind of might see as one perspective, but when you're told something else by an authority, that actually there's a greater kind of objective in that issue, then you can see that there's an authority. And that authority, from an Islamic perspective, is that Allah defines those issues where doing away with what's purely good and not what's purely bad, that's known to everybody. Those issues which can only be debated, Allah will give us direction as to this is what is determined as good and determined as bad. Another good example is alcohol, okay? That some people see it as a benefit. However, the sin and the evil in alcohol is greater than a benefit that can be found in it. Yes, there may be a benefit, but the harm is greater. So those issues which could possibly be debated, or depending on that person's perspective, then this is where we will have the Quran telling us, or the revelation, if you want to call it, determining and telling us this is to be labeled as good and will always be good. And this will be evil and will always be evil. If it's left in the handle, then depending on their power or their influence in people, then they can corrupt and oppression can occur. So therefore, these matters, morality, to do with rulings and whatnot, we always have the authority of revelation, because we understand as Muslims, Allah created His creation and knows His creation best, that what is best for them.
Yeah.
So this is our ultimate authority in understanding these things.
Mm.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. That reminds me of something. Just can I jump in quickly? About the stories that we know about how when Allah created Adam.
Everyone's back. Everyone's back. No. Seriously, it does need to be sorted. No, it's not. It's the internet, no. It's the internet.
Hello.
Assalamu
alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Right, we're back. We're back live. The whole computer just crashed. Modern technology. There's the evil within the system. Crashed it, corrupted it. Something happened. So I do apologize, audience out there. And we are live. So we'll continue this conversation. Everyone's here, right? Good, excellent.
Yes.
But everyone's
got the same name.
There's
Mohammad Thompson.
We're all Mohammad Thompson. Wow.
Oh, you're all Mohammad Thompson.
Weird.
Well done. Well done. Very interesting. Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's just turn the names off, shall we?
Yeah.
That's better. Yes. Let's just turn the names up. Hold on. Okay. We're going to go back. There we are. Okay, that's a bit better.
Yes.
Okay, that's a bit better, guys.
I'm just gonna finish what I've started there.
Go on.
The story is about how when Allah created Adam, and the angels were questioning Allah, why are you creating something that gonna cause shed bloods, gonna cause corruption? And Allah answers very, very simple. Yeah. قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. So indeed, I know what which you do not know. So this is actually quite important, because majority of the time when we talk about the concept of good and evil and things that happenings around us, there are many, many, many things out there that happen that we don't know why it happens, or there might actually be something good that lead out of that, which I think from us as a Muslim perspective, as a Muslims, when something happened, about the what we call it, the theologies, or the concept of understanding suffering from Islamic perspective is, suffering might occur sometimes just to purify our sins, or some suffering might occur in order to increase the human being in gratitude. Suffering might occur to develop humility and submission in the heart. So more and more and more and more. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. A good point. If we didn't, so this was, I didn't hear, unfortunately, Wasim, I didn't hear about the authority issue. Well, I asked you a question about authority. Who's the authority? Who can define what good and evil is? Let's go over that again and make sure that all the audience heard that, because I certainly didn't.
Okay. So essentially, it was talking about the classification of good and bad, and things can be seen as pure good and pure evil. And then there are things which, depending on that person's perspective, may be seen as good and bad. And this is what I said, where I said that from a Muslim perspective, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the revelation explains to us and clarifies those issues so that we don't fall on the wrong side. So the example of alcohol I gave. So, Allah tells us that there is a manafi' linnas, there's maybe some benefit for the people. However, the sin and the evil that is involved in alcohol far outweighs whatever good a person can find. So this is where the authority for us as Muslims is put into place, and this is continuous. It doesn't change. So what was seen as good, 1,000 years ago is good now, and that what was seen as evil 1,000 years ago is an evil now, and this is one of the miraculous natures of the revelation, in that we are given a set of laws, regulations, guidance that is applicable for all times and all places. Because humankind, if it's not kept within a certain kind of direction, can destroy itself and harm itself.
And hence, Firdausi's good point about suffering. Suffering is a necessary thing, an evil, which corrects people and stops them from going and doing absolutely mad things. And like my wife putting the coffee machine on in the middle of the webinar like she just done, and that's caused me suffering and harm, and all the audience as well. In fact, the whole household today is, you can hear lots of activity going on in the background. What I want
can I just throw something out?
Go for it. Is there anything about coffee then we don't want to know? Go for it.
No, I'm not into coffee anyway. So I just want to throw something out there. Is suffering evil? Is it evil? Because if we learn something really good from that, is that then considered evil? I'm just throwing it out there.
Evil is suffering is a consequence of evil, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it? That is the Quranic, Wasim. That is the correct understanding.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. No. A person can suffer, and that is actually good for them. In that, if you understand that this can be an expiation and a removal of sins.
Yes,
that's right.
And that a person may go through the smallest of suffering, but bears patience with that, and they meet their Lord in a state with no sin. So, from that perspective, it's not necessarily the case. It can be of something which is a source of purification for that person. Again, if they have that correct understanding. If a person doesn't have that, then the person will be in a perpetual state of living. They're going through a test and some suffering, and doesn't know how to get out of that. So they're in this situation where it's pure suffering for them, and it could be.
Okay.
And just another point there quickly, right? If you have a lot of money, is it good or bad? If you have a lot of amount of wealth, and that wealth put you away from Allah, and that's gonna be a bad thing for you. It's a trial for you. So just because you think it's nice to have that, but it doesn't mean that's what it is. You know what I mean? So only Allah knows best what the overall perspective. I think I like to listen to Hamza Totis, and Hamza always mentioned this. We human, we only see one pixel of something. But Almighty God see a lot more, see everything that which we don't see. We only see one pixel at a time. We don't see, when you use a Photoshop, you try to edit some pictures. You look through one pixel at a time. That's what we humans see. We don't see the overall thing. On the other hand, Allah knows everything, and this is crucial.
Okay, very good point. Very good point. Firdaus, brother Firdaus, mashallah. We've got another couple of family members joined us in the kitchen over here, so we'll get some more interaction from the audience. I've got an audience here. Okay, so essentially, what I want to put this question now, particularly in secular Western democratic societies, where did they get the idea of good and evil? Who wants to address that? Where did they get the idea of good and evil? Who gave them this information? We're talking about the fitra. Is it fitra, or where did they get this information of good and evil? Which 99% we agree on, although things are changing.
If you're talking about, I'll just jump in here quickly
go for
before
it.
My 2 cents worth. Well, if you talk about Western, it's probably come back from the original, because most of the Western countries, going back a bit, were basically Christian-based, I expecting. So they probably come from their teachings, which has then come initially from the Creator.
The Ten Commandments.
Yeah,
biblical,
10 Commandments.
The Injil, the Gospel, etc., etc. All the books, the prophets that were sent. Is that with a consensus? Is that? I mean, do we ever argue those points when we're giving dawah or calling people to Islam in the West? Jamshed, you're looking very quizzical over there.
Yeah, I'm. You know me. I'm a fan of, or actually, no. I'm really not a fan of questions that ultimately don't really get a person from a subjective perspective anywhere. In terms of arguing, okay, where did good and evil come? I mean, okay, fine. In terms of secular society, the secular societies of today evolved from the theological-based societies of yesteryear, and obviously a lot of those teachings were based on the theology there. So all they've just basically done is start off with that template that the theology has given them, which, for the most part, conform around the world, generally speaking. But then they just change and adapt it to suit their own needs, capitalism and whatever have you, personal nafs and desires. Sometimes it works, sometimes it fails. A good example is, what's that period called in America? Where they abolished alcohol. Where they tried to abolish alcohol, right? I forget... prohibition. Prohibition. And it completely it backfired spectacularly because of the way they went about it. There was no basis. It was just the government saying no, and everyone said yes. And eventually, the people went out. Rather than in Islam, the way that it was done, it was attached to your love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Islam and following Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. People gave it up willingly, but the point being that in secular society today, people are just essentially, literally making it up as they go along. Literally, that's it. I mean, look at the government last year. Oh, face covering. No, it's bad. It's bad. We can't do anything. Now it's face covering. You have to have the face covering. It's like subhanallah. Like,
who defines? Who defines?
Make it up as you go. There's no standard. You just they're just making it up as they go along.
But however, the law, the legal system, the courts, etc., how they administer punishments and rewards, but certainly punishments, overwhelmingly, it is objective to say that, look, killing is an evil. Stealing one's property is an evil. Coveting another man's wealth is an evil. These are the 10 Commandments, right? So on and so forth, right? So are those Abrahamic? Are those religiously inspired? And can we argue this? Sheikh Wasim,
I
want to bring you in with my aid here.
I think it's when you're talking about ethics and morality in politics, this is its own kind of subject. And what you mentioned a little bit earlier, just thinking about it, that yes, the legal system or morality in politics has its kind of beginnings many centuries ago, and it's depending on one country to the next. If many of the Western countries where the church had a big say in how the ruling of the country, church would be a major part of that. But over a period of time where secularism has, the different types of secularism has kind of become much stronger within politics, there is a gradual kind of detachment, and you'll find that France in their politics is very different from the UK. They're very proud of their kind of liberal, secular kind of way and detachment from religion as much as they can. They're very proud of that. It's very much more so than here in the UK, for example. So you find over a period of time, there's this detachment from the kind of religious kind of authority that exists and religious laws that exist within kind of governments. And as time goes along, as time is moving along, that these governments are now replacing certain ideals. They're replacing certain ethics and morals that people had 50, 60 years ago. These are being eroded away. And the self, the individual, is being put first instead of the greater benefit of those kind of divine laws that once were enshrined in their kind of laws and whatnot. So it is a very sad state of affairs where you find essentially people are becoming like they're a godless society because their governments and their rulers are moving away from those divine laws, which are by and large, a lot of them are universal, and it's a good da'wah step. Talking about why is killing wrong? Where did that come from? Who told you that? This is something innate and that religion supports. So when we start talking about stealing, and then you can start building the conversation this way, and then go on to those things which maybe people then start wanting to change as to the purpose of that change. Is it about what is greater for the greater good for the society, or is it about certain, just allowing the self just to follow their own desires, that everything can just go regardless of whatnot, which eventually, from an Islamic perspective, we can say will lead to the destruction of that individual and society.
Salwa says anything bad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it very clear in the Quran as a command for our own good, otherwise we suffer.
Can I just address one point that Sheikh Wasim mentioned? Sheikh Wasim brought up the question, it's a good strategy to ask the question, why is killing wrong? Where did that come from? Just going the other way, from the atheist perspective, from a truly hardcore atheist perspective, there is absolutely nothing wrong with killing, because life is just random. Your life force is just random. Your existence is random. Everything is random. So what difference does it make if one random thing just happens to kill another when there's no soul, there's no personality there, there's no fitra, there's no essence beyond the physical material thing. So an analogy for this is like, for example, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this program, Robot Wars, where people just construct these machines with the sole objective of just destroying one another. Nobody says that's evil. They do that for fun, for competition, for sport, but nobody cares because there's no soul there, there's no life there, there's nothing there of essentially value. But from the atheist perspective, life itself has no value because we're just a complete random accident, really. So from anyone to start arguing the value of life and then using that to negate the creator that actually gave life value is kind of completely mixing up the concept and actually the foundation of where they're even coming from. Atheists have got no way to say, whether life has value, because it's just an arbitrary thing. Why does a human being's life have more value than a strawberry? They're just random constructs of matter.
They have no purpose and no greater purpose at all.
Everything is just random. Everything is just random. Everything there's no feelings there. Like a computer doesn't care. A robot doesn't care whether it lives or dies because it doesn't have. We do because we have that that fitra, that innate sense of self and things like that. That is beyond the physical. Like there's no physical part in our brain and our body that there's a switch that says, okay, care about yourself or not. It doesn't exist. Our soul, our sense of being. Actually, here's a good question. A question is: do you have a skeleton inside you, or are you inside the skeleton? So think about it. Like when you consider you, what are you? Like you, the body. Do I have a skeleton inside this physical body? But then my consciousness and everything is in my brain, which is inside the skeleton. Like when you say you, where are you exactly? It's something that is separate to the material. But from the atheist perspective, only the material exists. So if it's only the material exists and you just reform, matter from one state to another state, ultimately, nothing really matters. Sorry, it was a little small.
Nothing really matters.
Nothing really. If everything was just matter, nothing really matters.
Apart from matter, which matters.
Yeah.
Because it's money and objects and the dunya. There's dunya, something very low. The object of our lives is just to amass and then sleep, eat, drink, and then die. What I'd like to ask then is, I put this question to the panel again. What would happen if we, in the human construct, did not punish evil? We did not punish evil. We didn't punish evil. We just let it go unchecked, right? Some guy goes off and randomly mows down 10 people, and because we don't see that as evil. Maybe some of us see it as evil, and it might even have a justification for doing it. What would happen to society in the absence of
chaos and anarchy and just total destruction of what we call society?
Yeah, somebody's called it demos crazy. I've used that one before.
Yeah. A sad part of this is that a lot of people would actually advocate and say, oh, no, the good people in society, they would take over and this, that, and the other. And no, they would curb it. It's a nice idea in theory, but in practice, it never, ever plays out. And let me give you an example that's going on today. For example, the idea of democracy, right, is supposedly a good thing, okay? And I want to be specific in my terminology here. Democracy here, where we are saying that the opinion of a complete idiot is equal in validity to the opinion of someone who is considered an expert, right? The equating of those two opinions, and then people saying, well, okay, I vote for a complete idiot to be, the most powerful man in the world versus, the lesser people who say, well, no, actually, you're going to have disaster. What do we have? We have, complete disaster, as we can see what's going on in certain countries in the world where their whole democratic process now is being dismantled. The point being that you can have this idea in theory that, oh no, in democracy, people will come together and they will vote for the collective, the greatest good, and blah 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 blah. In practice, that doesn't happen. It really doesn't happen because you have the people who are very easy to be manipulated, who don't have that knowledge to make that informed decision. And when you give those people the power, the same power as someone who has an informed position, you basically negate the expertise of the people who are informed, and that in and of itself leads to the destruction of society. These are nice ideas in theory. In practice, they just don't play out.
Quorum Ahmed Amin is saying, can I join the Zoom call? Well, we're not on Zoom, bro.
Well, I was going to say, we're not on Zoom.
But you can join it if you want. But no, I'm very serious. Well, thank you very much for your offer of, contributing. Contact us for a later show, maybe, Brother Khurram. Very, very nice for you to... I think Brother Khurram has been a regular contributor from my page over there. MashaAllah, good one, bro, Firdaus. I don't know what that means. What did you say, Firdaus?
I think that was Jamshed who talks, but that's all right. I'll take the credit.
Yeah, because the names are, of course, not evident because when I came back on, it gave
I'm
all of
Mohammed
you the
Thompson.
same label. Yeah. It recognized all of you as good. Mohammed Thompson.
Yeah. Will the real Mohammed Thompson please stand up?
Please stand up. Absolutely. So now let's go back to objective morality then. Is in light of this discussion, is it possible that there is no objective morality?
Depends from which.
Is it ever possible? I mean, to say that humans were created with and Allah just gave us the ability to decide or to an evolution of morality.
Yeah, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, I think.
Yeah.
This links to, the state of fitrah, or the natural disposition of a human being. And that the Prophet, peace be upon him, told us, and as well, of course, it's mentioned in Surah Al-Rum in the Quran, that this is a fitrah that Allah created mankind, womankind upon. And that if a person remains upon that pure natural disposition, they will be able to determine universal good and universal evil. Those types of moral issues, they will be able to understand those issues. As there are finer issues, which from one era or one time to the next, it may change. I'll give an example of this, okay? And it's important for us to make a distinction between from the beginning of time to the end of time, that they will never change. Like, for example, killing, okay, unjustifiably, that's always going to be wrong. And I give the example of the two sons of Adam alayhi salam. From the very beginning of time, they knew, of course, Qabil knew that he'd done something wrong. What about, for example, marrying your sister? Okay, now, at the moment now, this is morally wrong. Now, but there was a point in time that wasn't, but it was necessary. So, for example, the sons and daughters and the progeny of Adam alayhi salam, peace be upon him, that this was something was permitted. Okay, so there may be certain issues which are allowed at certain times due to necessity, and the revelation will determine that for us. So for time of Yaqub alayhi salam, who married two sisters, that was permitted in his Sharia, in the laws that were given to him. As for us now, for a man to marry two sisters, it is not permitted. Absolutely not. Because it's seen as, for the reasons, of course, now, is that it will cause enmity between the two sisters. But it was allowed at one particular time. So those issues which, depending on the situation, depending on the time, that may change depending on, the Sharia or the laws that are given at that time. But there are certain universal understandings of good and evil that will never ever change. And if a person remains in that kind of natural disposition, they will be able to determine that. This is why we need laws, for us to understand that we are restricted in certain issues, but at the same time also to promote things which are in our benefit. And if you don't have those laws, then, as we mentioned earlier, there's chaos, there's carnage, and it leads to essentially, a survival of the fittest in the most evil way. So therefore, it allows humankind to flourish in a sustainable way.
So we're going back to the days of Jahiliyyah or ignorance, that before the prophets came and gave their messages, particularly in the case of the Islamic or the Quranic revelation, 1430 odd years ago, the situation was incredibly bad before the Quran came in the Arabian Peninsula. We know that female children would be buried, and the wealthy and the leaders were very oppressive to their people. There was slavery and so on and so forth. So in the absence of refreshing that message, that objective moral message, then what happens to society? It decays. it decays. And what we see today, clearly, killing is widespread. We have, for example, children in London, in Birmingham, in Manchester, in my country, stabbing each other, and they don't even know really why they've done it. We have mass, poverty in the world. Subhanallah, poverty in the world, and although it's about distribution of wealth, one could see that there is enough food and products in the world to go around, but they're not being distributed equitably. So is it that the dawah, or the calling or inviting back to that moral compass, is missing? So, where do we go from here, guys? This is what I'm saying. I'm saying we need to bring this discussion back to solution-based discussions. We need solutions. We don't need to just be talking for the sake of talking. Guys, let's go around the table and find out how we're gonna deal with this and bring Islamic morality back.
So I'll start with a few points here, and then because that's the easier way to do. Number one is, from Islamic perspective, we see that God is not only all-knowing, but He's also wise. So whatever happened, God's wisdom, utilizes knowledge for the greatest possible objective. This is very, very important. And the knowing that God is all wise and He's also just, which is and everything. So to be honest, everything that can happen today, all intertwined, millions and millions of possibilities that can happen in the next hour, in the next minute. But everything happened because this is how God's view. Allah has this the whole pixel thing that I mentioned before. And the next thing is, what we have to differentiate between God's will and love. There's two different things. And just because something bad happened, like genocide or whatever it is, that can actually be to show love, that God wanted to show love from the other community, other people who have responsibility, who actually put out. We'll give you an example. What happened in Lebanon, for example, recently. Yusuf and me and Yusuf, we were discussing about it last week. What happened in Lebanon is a trial for the people there, but it's also a trial for us, those who don't suffer from it, to actually contribute, to actually be part of it and help the people over there. So it's a trial for them and for us. Whether because we have at the moment, are we willing to actually share our wealth with our brothers and sisters in Lebanon? So that's from me, inshallah.
Okay, Jazakallah khair from Auckland there, Dr. Fidoz there, alhamdulillah. Okay, Jamshed.
Yeah.
How do we bring back this morality? I mean, how is it possible? It seems like such a quagmire we're involved in now, and evil seems to be surmounting the good. The evil consequences of our evil actions, collectively, individually, are blossoming. Unfortunately, I'd like to use a different word rather than blossoming. How are we going to address or redress the situation and try to bring a sense of objective morality back?
Okay, so let me answer that by just going around it a little bit and just coming from the other side. So I want to highlight a comment that Sister Shireen mentioned about 20 odd minutes ago, which was very subtle but very important, that Allah gives us freedom of choice. And that's an important phrase to understand, that human beings, we have freedom to choose. We don't have free will. I cannot will myself to fly. As much as I would like to fly around, if just because I will it, it doesn't happen. What I have before me at any point in time are choices. And I can choose to go one way, I can choose to go another way. And some choices will lead me closer to Allah, some choices will lead me further from Allah, and some choices are just benign. They neither here nor there. I'm not going to have conflicts or something toast for breakfast, something like that. So now it's important to realize that a lot of the evil in the world, as you're saying, is man-made. Famines and certain things. There are of course natural disasters and things like that, but the wars, the famines, the state of society where kids are on the street and literally, with knives and other kinds of weapons and things like that. This is a man-made problem. This is not a problem that just came out of just descended upon us. This is due to society not investing in itself, or rather certain elements of society not looking after themselves, so to speak. Or you could also look at it another way: certain elements of society, certain individuals who are extracting all the resources from society and holding them away. We have many billionaires and people that exist in the world today who have amassed far more wealth than they could possibly spend in 100 lifetimes, but rather than invest that and give that back and raise the state of communities, they would rather just put it in a bank account somewhere, imagining that they can take it with them after their demise. So we have to first of all recognize that evil in a lot of cases is a man-made thing, and it's a necessary outcome to have freedom of choice. If you want to have the ability to have freedom of choice, that necessitates that evil must exist, because you have to be able to have the option to choose between doing a good action and an evil action. Now, that said, also going back to our previous comments where, people have these ideas. A lot of atheists like to have this idea that, when an atheist is charitable, it actually means more, because when the Muslim or the Christian is charitable, we're doing it because God said so. But when the atheist gives charity, they're not expecting a reward from God. They're just doing it out of the goodness of their heart. So in that way, they're somehow morally superior. Okay, fine. Well, I'll take that argument, but here's the reality. When you look at you guys might remember there was that report in, I think it was in the Times a few years ago, of the theistic groups, which are the most charitable. Muslims came out number one. The Muslims are the most charitable because in Ramadan, we literally give millions and millions and millions in charity. And at the bottom of the table, in every single report that I've ever come across, atheists are the least charitable. It's a nice idea in theory, but the reality is that they don't give charity. Every single atheist I've asked about, do you actually give in charity? The answer is no. They actually don't. Or even if they do, it's literally, a few pounds. There's no significant mass there. So I think a lot of people are caught up in the idea of being good, but there does need to be that degree of enforcement. Now, obviously, in Islam, we have, one of the pillars of Islam is zakat, where you have to give a certain degree of your wealth and things like that. And we can go into how that lubricates society and that brings things about. But we need to basically teach the people the idea of, we need to give dawah. The more people who are Muslim, the more people who feel, or have some degree of compulsion in them to give the money back, to reinvest in society, that will cure a lot of issues. Even if all the Muslims in the world today, if they gave their zakat, a lot of problems could be resolved. So I really do think that, we need to start bringing people to, obviously, Islam holistically. And, inshallah, that'll cure a lot of problems. To cure this one specific problem outside of Islam, I have no idea. How are you going to convince people to just give away their money arbitrarily, particularly if they're not expecting for that to come back? There's also one other thing as well. You and I will remember as well, Yusuf, when we went to Africa, that obviously there's another theistic group there as well. People were giving in charity, but they gave not to the poor, but they gave to the institutions. And we went to places where there were magnificent buildings of worship, literally surrounded by people who were living in essentially shanty towns. So there also needs to be that accountability and awareness of, look, where are you giving your money? As Muslims, alhamdulillah, we can just give directly to the poor. We don't have to give to the imam or someone like that. Or we don't need a third party person to record, this is how much we've given. It's between us and our creator. Our creator knows. That's an important thing as well to bear in mind, that at the end of the day, the person on the receiving end of the charity, they don't care why you gave them the money. They're just happy for their help and the resource. They don't care, you're only giving it to me because you're a Muslim and your God told me, and I want it from the atheist because he's doing it out of the goodness of the heart. Mate, I'm giving you, help here. They're just going to take it whichever way, and they're just going to say thank you for it. It doesn't matter why you're doing it. So until people start realizing that this mindset that other ideologies promote of, no, give it to the institution, let the institution grow, forget the societies, or you should only just do it out of the goodness of your heart and not because there's a bigger, wider benefit. I don't think that's going to change. So as Muslims, we need to be a lot more active in our dawah and be able to confidently explain that, look, this makes a lot more sense because it works. You can come up with your pipe dreams and examples of what might be better in theory, but in the reality, this is what actually works, and this is what Islam teaches, and this is what you should be doing if you actually care about a better future rather than the idea of a better future.
Okay.
Actually, just one thing. With regards to the atheist, he's given charity because of the goodness. The atheist doesn't know how to define good in the first place.
Yeah. Yep.
There is that as well. And
secondly, what's not to say that he's just giving just to feed his own ego. Okay.
Yeah.
So the argument that may be given to say that I want to accept money from an atheist because they're not doing it for the purpose of a God. Actually, he's doing it for the purpose of his own selfish needs.
Is it
that he wants to feel good?
Act?
He wants to feel good. So if a person says that, then that's a flawed argument.
So that's where the difference in Islam is, because we're always taught, give from your right hand and your left hand doesn't know what you're giving, sort of thing. So that way, it's to try and reduce the ego, the importance of who we are, or say, look, I've got money, look at me, I've got so much money, I'm giving here and everywhere. So it's an ego. And we sort of then know that, that can then diminish what rewards we might get. It may not, but, sometimes it says that we should show what we're giving, so it might encourage others. But the main point is we give secretly, so that, like as I said, our left hand doesn't know what our right hand's doing, so that, this way we can benefit, and we're doing it for our humbleness and trying to get the best reward from our Creator. So it's trying to plan for our next life, because we, as Muslims who understand Islam, know that this is a temporary life, and what we have here, we're just custodians. Even the money we have, we're just custodians of it. And I think, I can't remember the exact hadith or whatever it is, Sheikh Wasim might be able to say, where I think it was the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his wife, and they had some meat, and they were trying to give part away, and he said, "Oh, we're only getting reward once we give that last bit away," or something like that. You might be able to relate that hadith, inshallah.
Yes. Yeah. So the hadith is that, as far as I remember, that they had an animal, and that most of it was given away, and they kept a little bit left. And then Aisha radiallahu anha said that most of it is gone. And that the Prophet responded to her that the most of it is remaining.
Yes.
Yeah.
Most of it is remaining. So, give it away. Not in charity. No.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay. I think we're drawing very close towards the end of the show. And so let's get a few last reflections from the panel on this topic. Of course, we're talking about the problem of evil. It was a problem because we ended up doing this in two parts. That was a problem. But the evil itself has been a recognizable factor in many people, either questioning their faith massively or actually apostating, leaving their faith. Okay? So this is why we've been discussing this issue. And I think that we just now need to, of course, we've got Jamshed's now got another scholar on board. He's
in training.
The next generation. Next generation of Jamshedi, the Jamshedi team. And so the real issue for us was of course, this discussion it's like a bottomless pit when you start picking up on it. But generally speaking, can we say, Jamshed, are you occupied?
No, I'm still here.
Yeah, you're okay. You're fine. Good. Okay. Alhamdulillah. You're being a good father, which is that's good. That's good. We can say that's good what you're doing. And collectively, humanity will say that's good.
My son is not respecting my privacy. That's very evil.
Yeah. That's very evil. Does he get
I don't know if it's evil.
No.
It's not evil. So, anything your son does is not evil at this age.
No, the pen is lifted or the pencil's lifted. Okay, so let's just sort of round this up and then define, the problem of evil. Okay. So, Jamshed, do you want to go, or do you want Wasim to go first?
The Sheikh's always going to give you like the tar answer, so I'm going to give like the small answer, and then I'll leave the Sheikh to sum it up. Especially, right? No, I just want to make one comment that I don't think we've really discussed. That look, at the end of the day, why do we exist? We exist, obviously, to worship Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. There is something that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has promised us at the end of it, which is Jannah, which is paradise, which is eternal bliss. So long as we conform to certain rules and things like that, and we cope with difficulties that are thrown our way. People that have had difficulties thrown your way, I mean, you can use these, and when we're talking this time, to use these as stepping stones to get closer, that there are maybe some levels that you cannot reach unless you persevere with the difficulties that are thrown your way. Right? Yeah, no, you can't.
Like those ones.
Ultimately, the question that I ask people that have this problem is, listen, do you want paradise for free? Do you expect paradise for free? A lot of people seem to have this idea that, well, I don't live in a perfect world. I don't live in a world that's free from disease, from X, Y, and Z. Therefore, I'm just going to deny God altogether. It's like, come on, bro. That's not the way it works. Just because things not the way that you like it to be or you want it to be doesn't mean that that's not a future that is coming or is promised, if that makes sense. Fundamentally, do you want paradise for free? Anyone who wants paradise for free, I'm sorry, man, I don't know where you got this idea from. It's an exceptional reward, and it needs to be earned, and it's earned by persevering. Persevering. All kinds of trials. Anyway, I'm just going to call it and see what this guy's like. Yeah,
Barakallah fi. That's fantastic. That's a great way of rounding up your contribution there. Not just in the home, but to this webinar. Alhamdulillah. Sheikh Wasim, let's get a bit of rounding up from you on the issue of evil and to sum it all up.
Yeah. So what I would say is that, what I've benefited most from our discussion this evening is that it's a reminder for me that, when Allah tells us, ادعو إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن. Call people to the path of Allah, okay, with the revelation that's been given to you, with wisdom, okay, and debate with them in the very best way, with a fine admonition if necessary. That when we speak to people, and this is something very important as well to Muslims, and they kind of fall off the edge. We can have a moral argument with them as well, a moral debate, not argument, a moral debate. Mm-hmm. So, for example, the Prophet ﷺ on occasions would morally admonish companions instead of just saying, a person might say, oh, fear Allah, remember the hereafter, remember the punishment of Allah, or seek the Jannah. A companion, he came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, give me permission to commit zina. So the Prophet ﷺ didn't just simply say to him, fear Allah, this is haram, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا zina. Allah says, don't come near zina. The Prophet admonished him with a moral argument, saying that, are you happy that this would be for your mother? Or will you be happy for your sister? And he said, no, of course not. Then he realized the moral kind of stand on that issue. So for us as Muslims, we have so many ways of speaking to people. It's not just, commanding them, go offer your 5 prayers. If you find a Muslim who's kind of falling off the rails, okay, and they want to have another life, sometimes you need to take that moral route with them to say, okay, so what life do you want? What path maybe you found something that I haven't found. And then you can bring the Islamic superiority and the beauty in the morals and ethics that Allah has given to us. And I think this is, one of the good things that we should remind ourselves with. As Muslims, we can have many feathers in our cap in how we're going to give da'wah. It's not about just here's the Quran, read the Quran, fear Allah. No, on all levels, Allah has given us the tools to deal with mankind in correcting them to that what is best for them in this life and in the hereafter.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Okay, so problem of evil is not really a problem. It is a solution for mankind. It's a solution, guys. If we didn't have evil, we wouldn't even be talking today, and we wouldn't be giving dawah. We'd be sleeping or hiding away from hiding away and waiting for the inevitable death to occur, and we'd probably be wishing death. Is that really the case? Can we sum it up like that? Brother Mohammed and Firdaus? Who wants to
go? I like us. I think, again, like I said before, I don't think evil is the problem so much. It's what we do with it, or how we treat it, how we take it, and then from how we grow from it and take it. So as being a believer, then you've got, alhamdulillah, we're in the best situation. If, as a true believer, you take the evil as being a lesson, something to learn from and build from and get closer to the Creator. And I think what we need to do is when we're doing the dawah and things like that, is not focus on the evil, but focus on the good, but focus on things which, we have to, like in sales, you have to talk to the customer, sort of get to know and understand where they're coming from, so what they're looking for and things like that, and then talk to them about that side of it, not to sort of say, well, you got to do the 5 pillars, you got to do this, and this, but you got to get to what turns them on, what starts them up and things like that. So to try and understand that, and then work with all the things that Allah's given us in the Quran and the Sunnah and things like that, to try and show them what Islam is. Not convince them, we can't convince them, but try and show them what Islam is and show them what things they can understand. It's no point just talking to an atheist and straight out saying, God has given us this and show this, and that. You've got to look from where they're coming from and try and understand their side of it, and then overcome it with that, inshallah.
Inshallah.
And
I've
go
got.
for it, does by.
Yes, I think everybody has covered this really, really well. I think the main important thing is to understand the whole concept of what Islam taught us, and when you all are discussing about this, it always reminds me of the video that Yusuf and Mama Thompson did in that wheel in New Zealand when you guys were on a tour. And Yusuf likes to recite this verse, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And in no way did I create jinn and mankind except to worship me. So I think by knowing the purpose, and who Allah is and His characteristics, His attributes, and then you will understand the whole thing that happened. Actually, there's a reason for it. And I just want to, and last point is about Jamshed talk about, there is a degree of enforcement is needed. And that's what, people say, why Islam is so restrictive. No, hold on. It's actually the degree of enforcement is required because it's the nature of a human being. Just like why we have a speed limit, why we have to have a police that monitor us, why we need to have all of that. Because unfortunately, a human being, if there's no enforcement, we wouldn't do it. And this is what the atheists always talk about. You don't need it because this has to be good. Everybody just has to be good. But in reality, it's not how we human beings function. And that's just from last word from me, inshallah.
Well, that's very beautiful. It's thank you very much for everyone's contribution. Jazakallahu khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put it on your mizan. And brothers and sisters who've contributed out there, Abu Huda, she's been amazing. Salwa, or should I say Abu, probably, I'm not sure if it's a man or a woman anyway. Salwa,
Mohammad Maher.
Yeah, Mohammad Maher is doing, he says it's a weekly Iman boost. Barakallahu feekum. It's an Iman boost for us. Why do you think we're doing this? We're doing it because we want to challenge ourselves to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we want to have these discussions, what I call back in the day discussions. We were having these discussions in the 90s, in 2000s, we were in the year 2005 and 10, and then suddenly there's been like a vacuum. And it's an inexplicable vacuum. Maybe it's explained by these things and these things that but whatever reason it is, there's been a vacuum, and we need to bring back this discussion, real talks Voice of Islam. That's what it's going to be called from now, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you all abundantly. And Brother Yusuf, that was from Mohammad Mahar. And there's a few people who want to come on with us. We might even invite them on, actually, on the forthcoming shows. Thank you, Sheikhs, for this amazing discussion. These questions on good and evil are asked by Muslims and non-Muslims. It's necessary for Muslims in trying times to understand it. From Shireen, I agree. I totally agree with you. We miss Zakir. Dr. Zakir's around. He's always doing stuff online. Maybe we'll call him, Dr. Zakir, another day to discuss with us. The beauty in the way that you all give dawah is unparalleled, mashallah. Well, I mean, if you weren't here, we wouldn't be giving dawah. So it's just as much your responsibility and you get rewarded for it. Lots of questions, comments about Jamshed's beautiful children and his cats. Yes, mashallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect them and allow them to be good, die in the state of Islam. Beautiful, beautiful, pure Islam. Lots and lots of amazing questions and comments. Keep them coming next week. We're going to be joining you at the 10 o'clock show, the 10 a.m. show, which is talking about educating our children, our next of kin, and then what has become now the 7:15 show, because it's now time for Maghrib. And we've got to hasten now to do part of our one of our prayers of the day, of course, our 5 prayers of the day, Salatul Maghrib. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward all of you brothers and sisters out there, and for you to have these amazing discussions with your not yet Muslim friends and neighbors. Have them candidly and sincerely. Bring the beautiful the philosophy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to light. Read the Quran and teach it to others. Can I just
add something that the sister Salwas just said? I'm letting my friends know you and sharing your great topics. I think everyone who's watching should pass on and let their friends and relatives know as well, even non-Muslims, to interact and come and watch the show and be participants as well, inshallah.
And also to share it after we've gone off.
Exactly.
You can share it all, and as long as it's there, you share. Jazakallah khair for that, Brother Mohammed Thompson, and we're going to give Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all of you guys out there. Until next week, take care.